Good morning. Today is July the 29th. This is the last Monday of July. Wow, summer is just flying by. Summer flies by when you're in summer school. Today is July the 29th, and we have a lot of things to talk about, especially this Paris Olympics thing. Some crazy stuff going on in Paris, and we'll be talking about that this morning. But before that, we'll be going over our next chapter in the book of Ecclesiastes, growing wiser and wiser day by day. So all of that, and we'll talk about Joe Biden too. There's a lot of things happening.
Excited.
Very, very exciting. You are listening to the Dear Church Podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church Podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang, and we have with us Pastor Eugene Chuntuk and Brian. The whole crew is back. The whole squad is back today. And Pastor Eugene, today, well, first of all, how's your summer going? It's almost over now.
Yeah. It's great. I'm watching you thrive in the summer school.
Thriving is a good word.
Yeah. Eating well.
Yeah.
I heard the food in summer school is spectacular.
We've had a kid say, "I wish my mom cooked like this." To me, I can't disclose who it was, but I didn't know what to say. I said, "I'm sure she does cook like this." I didn't know how to respond.
You said, "I'm sure she cooks like this."
They caught me off guard. I didn't know what to say. But yes, please continue to pray for our summer school. We have 3 weeks left. This is the beginning of our 4th week. And the teachers,
there.
we are halfway there.
Yeah.
The teachers, we're getting tired. We're getting a little tired. So please continue to pray for us. And everything is going extremely smoothly. So thank you for all your prayers so far. But please, 3 more weeks. Please pray for us. Today we are talking about the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And this is actually one of my favorite chapters in the book of Ecclesiastes. I think people might be having questions on the different seasons and stuff like that. And we'll get into that in just a moment. You flipped that on me. I asked how your summer's going, and then you flipped it for me to talk about myself, and I lost myself.
Should we talk about this?
So we do have DCP merch. It's here. I know everyone's really upset at me about it being August. This was a New Year giveaway. So to ring in the new year, we are giving away this DCP merch. It's actually packaged with something. It's this what is this? What is that called? Tumbler. The Tumbler plus blank. I can't tell you what it is. And we'll be giving it out to those people that emailed us back in January. So it might have honestly been December because it was in the Spotify Wrapped thing. That might have even been December. So you've waited so long. It's finally here. I heard that the longer you wait, the better it gets. So just like fine cheese. It is here. You'll receive them this month or actually the next month in August. So thank you for listening. Thank you. But again, you're not telling me what's going on this summer. Are you enjoying the...
Yes. I've enjoyed it very much.
Thank you. What has been like your favorite... Thank you. That's good. Me too. So I think it would behoove me, that's not the right word. I would like to read for us Ecclesiastes chapter 3. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 3. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What gain has the worker from his toil? I've seen the busyness that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. That which is already has been. That which is to be already has been. And God seeks what has been driven away. Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, even there was wickedness, and in the place of righteousness, even there was wickedness. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. I said in my heart, with regard to the children of man, that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beast is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beasts, for all is vanity. All go to one place. All are from the dust, and to dust all return. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what will be after him? Amen. And that's Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And I think there's a couple questions that can spring up for us, but just to, I guess, begin, the book of Ecclesiastes so far has put us in our correct place. I guess the vanity of our lives here, the vanity of everything that we aspire to do and aspire to achieve in the scope of eternity, and how short and how but a breath it is. And so I guess we've moved on now to King Solomon talking about seasons. Maybe could you just kind of explain for us maybe how this ties together?
Well, I'm sure you have a lot of questions. For me, this chapter is probably one of the more enigmatic chapters in the book. It is a favorite of a lot of people, including yourself. Mm-hmm. And these sets of verses, or this set of verses, does that make sense? Yeah, this set of verses.
These sets of verse.
There's one set of verses. From verses 2 to 8 is what's read in funerals.
Oh yeah.
So you ever think about why it's read in funerals?
I would assume that it's comforting to know that everyone has a season that they're going through, and everyone will eventually die because that's the season that they are in. And so it's comforting to know that this isn't something that's just happening to you or your family. This happens to everybody, and everyone goes through seasons. Also, we know that seasons end. And so we know that this time of grieving and suffering will end and open up to hopefully a more joyful season. So I would assume that's why.
Yeah, that's good. I think it has deep meaning to it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we can garner from it also is from verse 1, it kind of explains what verses 2 to 8 will be like.
Right.
This is a time for every matter under heaven. And it does give the implication that these are things that are not under your control. Mm-hmm. No matter how much you want to control it, and I get it. You know, people say, "Well, what about this exception? What about that exception?" But I don't think it's an exception.
Yeah.
Even things like suicide, I do not think is an exception. I think these seasons here are seasons that are under heaven, meaning God controls these seasons and you do not have control over them.
Right.
And that is a time to be born and a time to die. And these two things cannot be put together. And if you really wanted to go deep into this, you could go to good, bad, bad, good, bad, good, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
there's the difficult, and then there's the refreshing, if I were to put it maybe in more easier terms. So here's the refreshing: born, difficult, die, refreshing, plant, difficult, pluck up. Now goes back to difficult, kill, refreshing, heal. Goes to, difficult, break down, refreshing, build up, difficult, weep, refresh. So it does this back and forth. And these two things that are contrasted with each other cannot be at the same time at the same place. So you can't have these two seasons take place at the same time. So there, if we really went into it, you could see some of the more nuances of what is being taught here by the Koholeth, the teacher. But I think the overarching theme is God controls these seasons, and they are out of our control.
So I think people know, and maybe this is a good reminder, because I think, people may forget, but people generally know that there are seasons, that everyone is in a specific season. But how do we, I guess, discern what season we are in? And of course, I think one of the biggest questions is, should I be dating right now? I think that's one of the biggest questions that people may be asking, especially.
Why did Junzuk chuckle there?
I love talking about dating. That's not true. That's crazy. So, and I think the dating thing, that's a huge question that a lot of people are asking, especially in our church. It's, am I supposed to be dating right now? Who am I supposed to be dating? Am I supposed to be focusing on my career? Am I supposed to have kids right now? Am I supposed to rest? Am I supposed to work? And I think another question is like, how do I know that I need to push myself harder to work during the season versus resting? So how do we discern what season we are in? Because it does seem like there are different seasons, and there are. How do we think through that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you see here is you don't know what season you're in all the time. In fact, that's a part of the discernment you want, but you may not get that. In fact, a lot of times you will not get that. Look at the end of verse 11. He cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. And then you look at the next segment, or the next portion of this chapter. It says in verse 18 that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the overarching theme again about this whole thing, it's God is in control of the seasons, not you, and you don't know all the time. In fact, a lot of times you don't know. But man behaves differently. Man behaves like we can control. We'll always try to look for exceptions.
Right.
It's like, what do you mean a time for war and a time for peace? Here are these warmongers that are controlling us, like puppeteers, and people always. That's one thing I don't, I can't really accept about conspiracy theorists. They believe that these oligarchs, or these behind the scenes dictators, or these powerful people, they're really the ones in control. And when you think like that, you don't think God is in control, which is a big problem if you say you're a Christian. So God is in control. And no matter how many times people may try to rage or rebel against God, it does not usurp God's authority or his sovereignty. God is still in control. And all these things and these seasons are under God. So you would think then, if I wanted to truly discern what season it is, then I need to understand God. I need to understand where he is. I need to understand his will. And then I will be able to understand or discern what season, I'm currently in, or the world is in, and whatnot.
Is there a sense in which, so another question that I have is there a sense in which we just kind of wait then? Because we know that God's sovereign. We know that everything comes in seasons, that God sends things in seasons. Is it then, should we be like waiting? So even the dating question, and the reason why I keep on asking this dating question is because I think that's a lot of our people's thought. Like, am I supposed to date? What am I supposed to do?
There's a time to embrace and then time to refrain from embracing.
So is there a sense in which you just kind of wait for God to send a man or to send a woman, or is it like how do we wisely discern even that, like our actions? Because it seems like our actions are leading to certain seasons.
Yeah, there's a time to seek, and then there's a time to lose.
I feel like, yeah, that's good. That's good stuff.
No, there's a time to date, and there's a time not to date.
How do you know that though? Like,
But that's what it's saying. There's a time, and what I'm saying is, if you really want to understand the time,
yeah,
then you have to understand who God is, and you won't understand who God is, so you won't always understand the time. But what you can do is understand that God is the one in control. And I know that might sound confusing, but it shouldn't be, because it goes on. It explains other things, obviously.
Yeah.
In this chapter, but it goes on to show you the futility of trying to control your seasons or trying to know everything absolutely. And it would place you in a position of humility then, and place you under, let's say, God, and say, I want to put myself under God. If this is my time, Lord, let me be obedient to follow through. And what you just asked me does remind me of Abraham's servant when he was supposed to go find a wife for Isaac. And when he goes, Lord, help me find this person that I'm supposed to look for, and let her do this. And in fact, Rebecca comes and she does exactly this, and this.
Yep.
And then he says, this is God. God is the one that did it. And so I feel like we need to be more like that. Lord, if this is your will, I want to be subject to it. I want to be obedient to it. Help me follow through. Teach me your ways. And it's not like, oh, I'm good now. Whatever God wills, I'm fine. That's not the attitude that he had. He was always on, the edge of his seat. That's what humility is. You're not laid back, relaxed, thinking, I know everything. I was like, oh, just let it come to me. I don't think anybody that really is a true servant of God, that is faithful to God, thinks like that. They are pressed forward, and they want to do what God wants. And so they are seeking him, and they are trying to do his will. And so I would say the number one thing is, if you want to know what season you're in and what you should be doing, then seek God.
Gotcha. So I know that the general, I guess, message of verses 2 to 8, it's talking about the sovereignty of God, the fact that God leads us through different seasons. But I'm curious because he put very specific things here, right? Like, even though the general message is that God is sovereign, he put very specific actions, like a time to kill, a time to heal. Like, he didn't say a time to sleep and wake up. Like, he could have said anything, but he chose these actions on purpose. And so I'm curious, when is there ever a time to hate? What is this hate talking about? And what is the casting stones and gathering them together about? Because it has to be important, right? Because he could have said anything, and yet he chose to say these things in verses 2 to 8.
I mean, I have my feelings. I feel like, in my, personal opinion, these are things that he chose, obviously, for a reason.
Right.
And I think these are things that a lot of people think they can control. They can control these things. And they believe they have sovereignty over these things. But he's showing us, actually, it's a matter under heaven. Heaven controls this ultimately. We can think or act like we control it, but we would be deceiving ourselves, because if you really, really were honest with yourselves, you would say, oh, I don't have control. In fact, I need to subject myself to the season that it's in. If it's raining, I don't go out saying, I wish it was sunny. You have to subject yourself to the rain. So you put on rain boots, or you have an umbrella. And that's how you succeed in life. Right? By subjecting yourself to what is truer and out of your control, what is outside of your, control. But that's what it is here. If you're saying, why he did it exactly, I don't know, but it does seem like there is that theme of a lot of the things that are here. People think that they can control these things.
I see.
And these are things actually you can't control. because you need to discern what season it is. So you need to discern whether you should plant, whether it's a season of planting or whether it's a season of harvesting. Because even if you think you can control it, you actually don't control it. You can subject yourself to the season. So when it's the proper time to plant, you plant. When it's the proper time to harvest, you harvest. And that's actually what happens, right? And so if you do that, then you understand actually I am just placing myself in subjugation over the things that I don't have control over because these are matters under heaven. Now, to your question, is there a time to hate? Absolutely, there's a time to hate. I hate you? No, I don't.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say Brian, but I decided not to.
See, I knew you would say that. So
I didn't say it, though.
I preemptively. Yeah, but there's absolutely a time to hate. You know, we are to hate the sin. We are to hate our enemy when it comes to, you know, ultimately when it brings us into that kind of sin. You know, and then so things like that. By enemy, I hope people understand it is the evil demonic forces that we're fighting against, not like a person like you or something like that.
Paris Olympics, we'll talk about it.
But, you know, those are things that we should absolutely understand. There is a time to hate. There is a time to love, you know. There's a time to embrace. There's a time to refrain. The casting stones one is confusing. There's a lot in this chapter I don't know. So I don't know exactly what verse 14 means. I don't know exactly what verse 5 means. I could tell you what I have found in my studies, though. So casting stones, it could be some reference to some Babylonian era or the language or culture that they use. Some scholars say that. It's just from recollecting what I've read. And some Jewish scholars have said this is in reference to, because it's the Babylonians, this is in reference to intercourse or sex.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so we don't understand it because it's not there. The two others that I remember that stood out to me was the casting stones could be planting fields. So you could cast stones away so that you could till the ground. You could gather stones together so that it's unfarmable, untillable.
I see. Okay.
And for me, that kind of makes the most sense because if you gather stones together and it's untillable, then you've made a roadway because they didn't have like cement or anything back then.
Right.
Asphalt. And so you've made a road. You just can't farm that land, that kind of thing. So you could gather stones together. It can also mean some sort of transaction. That's the third one. So you can cast stones, gather stones. It's some kind of commercial transaction that they did in the ancient world with stones.
I see.
So you could think of it that way. So I don't know exactly which one it is. I couldn't tell you for sure. But the farming thing makes sense. The sex thing makes sense because right after that it talks about embrace. And then the commercial thing makes sense for me. So those three make sense. I would probably lean toward the farming part.
So, you know, what's really funny is when we were talking about the hating thing, when I said I hate Brian, I heard Brian like clacking away at his keyboard. I think he's taking notes of the time to know what to delete, but I don't want him to delete this part. He's like trying to protect my image, but I don't need his protection. I don't need Slim Man to protect me. He's clacking away. I think he's going to delete this part. Blah, 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 blah. You can't delete me. Come on, man. Don't delete me. I'm just kidding. Brian's like the best. He's like my best friend. Yeah.
Yeah, he is.
Psych. See? That's not... He's typing. He's going to delete all of this. So one of my favorite verses in this chapter is verse 11. He has made everything beautiful in his time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart. Yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. A lot of people have used this verse to talk about the Imago Dei. We have eternity in our hearts. We know that we were, as some might say, we were made for more than this, that this world is not the end. And perhaps that's why every single religion has some sort of afterlife. It's a misunderstanding of the eternity that God has placed in our hearts, but it's us trying to figure out in our own minds what this afterlife or what this eternity is. It's like a pursuing after this truth in our hearts that we just don't understand. Can we then assume this about everybody? Meaning, could this be a connecting point for evangelism? Because if we know that everybody has eternity in their hearts, then we know that at some point they have thought about eternity in the sense of there is an afterlife, in the sense of there is something that we are going to after this life, or somewhere we're going to after this life. And if so, is that something that we can use as a point for evangelism? Because I know R.C. Sproul, his point of evangelism was the question of what do you do with your guilt? Because everyone knows, no matter how much they may deny it, everybody knows that they have guilt because they're sinners. And they might say, I'm not a sinner. I've never done anything wrong. I'm not a Christian. I don't believe in God. But you can't escape the sense of guilt that you have because, in fact, you are a sinner. Is it the same way with eternity in the sense of when you approach somebody to evangelize to them, you know for a fact that because they have eternity in their hearts, you could talk about heaven and they will understand exactly what you're talking about?
And what's the theological term for that?
Presuppositions. No.
That's not even close. I don't even know how you got that word. How did you get that word, Brian?
Preeminence.
How did he get there?
Precepts. What is it?
Read your text.
Are you texting me? Oh, I knew this. I talked about. Okay, it's the sensus sensus. So one time Calvin was like. Calvin was like, I feel like there's a sense of the divine, a sensus divinat. It was French. I don't know.
It's not French.
I don't know Latin. Latin's a dead language, so I don't speak it in Latin. But sensus divinitatis.
Yes.
Divinitatis.
Yes.
So it's a sense of the divine, the eternity in the heart. I thought you were talking about like presuppositions because everyone has presuppositions and then you evangelize in knowing those. I thought that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, okay, that's true too.
Like presuppositional apologetics.
Yeah,
Apologetics.
There's a lot to this verse. I don't know if we'll have time to get through every single one. There's a lot to the verse. And this is one, definitely a beautiful verse, also multi-dimensional, multifaceted. What does it mean that he put eternity into man's heart? Eternity, the word for eternity is the same as forever. It's duration, but not a human duration. It is duration in God's terms. So God's duration, which is an incredible thing to think about. Also, if you look at this word is also used in Genesis chapter 6, I believe verse 4. I don't have it in front of me, but can you check Genesis chapter 6, verse 4?
Genesis chapter 6, verse.
Can you read it?
No, I was just checking for it. I think it's 3. Then the Lord said, "My spirit shall not abide in man." Not that one.
Nope.
4 is the Nephilim.
You read it.
It's the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown.
Yeah, there's the word there. It's the same word as eternity.
Old?
Yeah, the word old. So men of old, men of renown. And the word old is translated from the word forever or eternity. So eternity wouldn't have made sense there. So they said men of old. I think it's a fascinating thing. So when you think about eternity, you think about forever, you also think about the past and how that past is eternal, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of an incredible concept to think about. And it's something that I think we can stay in for a very long time if you like that sort of stuff, like philosophy. What?
We can stay on it for eternity.
I don't know like about that, but a long time. Maybe 20 more minutes, not eternity. But in that sense, what you see here is he made everything beautiful in his time. So there are times everybody blossoms, but then that kind of thing is from old, from eternity, from forever. And yet we don't know. We don't know what God plans or has planned from beginning to the end. You can see things sprout up, and it points to eternity. It points to forever. It points to the past. It points to the future. But we don't know from beginning to the end exactly what's going on.
Right.
But we try to figure it out. And as we've tried to figure it out, we've come up with all these religions. Again, the sensus divinatis.
How come I couldn't pronounce that? That was tough.
Sensus divinitatis.
I didn't take Latin in school, so maybe
It's fine. You don't need to. You don't need to understand that either. Even if you don't know the words, totally fine. But when we think about that in our hearts, we do, in a sense, want the eternity, but we want to understand the eternity.
Yeah.
And we can't understand the eternity. That is the conundrum. That is the conflict. That's what we are facing now. We want to understand eternity. We have eternity, but we cannot understand eternity, even though we want to. And so that is a fascinating concept that he brings up for people to kind of get. And I really like how he starts this verse with, he has made everything beautiful in its time. So when you see the time, you're like, oh, this is true. Like flowers bloom. It's beautiful in its time.
Yeah,
And then, that kind of thing. And so we see that it is part of a cycle or a plan or some kind of stream, and yet we don't fully understand the stream. This is why people have tried and it kind of falls short, and then it sounds dumb because you're trying to encapsulate what God has done from the beginning to the end, but you can't. So you make up things like the multiverse theory, you make up things like the sacred timeline, and it just sounds dumb.
Avengers.
It just sounds dumb because it's obviously too reductive. It's too simplistic. As complex and as multifaceted as you want to make this sacred timeline versus the multiverse and all that stuff, it just sounds dumb. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly proving this point.
Yeah.
You don't know what God has planned, but you want to know.
For our benefit, in terms of, we're Christians, and I'm assuming that people that are listening to this podcast are also Christians. And as Christians, we want to evangelize to our friends and family and our loved ones. And I'm wondering, is this a good connecting point to begin with? Because I know a lot of times people have trouble evangelizing and they don't know what to say and they're not prepared and they get stressed out, they get scared, and evangelizing can be a difficult thing to do for many. And so I'm wondering if we can equip people, just understanding people in general. Like, everyone knows eternity. Everyone has eternity in their hearts, and therefore you could use that as a diving
but what does
board.
it translate to? If you could only think about it ephemerally, like you can only think about it in the metaphysical sense, it doesn't mean a lot to the everyday person, perhaps. Perhaps it means something to somebody. But if you start off with the line, he has made everything beautiful in his time, what does that mean? So beauty is correlated with significance. You realize something is beautiful because you realize its significance. And this is just like what Vice President Kamala Harris said.
That was on purpose. Isn't that Kamala?
Kamala Harris said. And that is, there is significance to the passage of time. That might be the most nonsensical. No, okay. But then I think what she was trying to, I don't know. I don't know what she was thinking. But what people have gathered about the passage of time is the significance that people have in the passage of time, the significance that objects and beings and all these things that come up in the passage of time have. Not the passage of time having any significance, but what goes in through the passage of time. So this is where, that's why that statement that she made was so bad. But you are beautiful in a time, in a specific portion of time, meaning there's significance that you understand yourself to have or whatever object has.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody kind of sees. No matter who you are, you see beauty, that means you see significance. That means you yearn for this understanding of significance. Because God, he goes also, has put eternity or forever or that duration or the godly understanding of duration, not time, but duration in your heart. And yet you can't find out exactly what he wants. So that passage is kind of deep in that sense. But if you wanted to evangelize, I would think that you could start with eternity. I don't know if you'd really want to get into the metaphysical, but you probably, for me, I would probably go into significance, meaning the purpose of your life. What is your purpose?
Yeah.
Everybody believes they have a purpose. Even if you're an atheist, as you know, as contradicting that is for their atheistic beliefs, they believe they have a purpose. So they don't believe in God, and yet they are social justice activists, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Or they want, like Ricky Gervais is a very famous atheist, and yet he wants ethical or humane treatment of animals. So he sees that as a purpose in his life. Purpose is derived by some kind of cause. You don't just have purpose out of nothing.
Yeah.
And so when God has made everything beautiful in its time, when God has given everything a purpose for its time, you see that God is the one that gives purpose. Where do you think you got your purpose given from? Why are you so driven to a certain cause? Do you think it just came out of nowhere? And they're like, no, I have compassion on, these animals or whatever it is. Where did that come from,
Yeah.
And so he succinctly and very briefly, but also brilliantly points it to it's God who put the duration or the forever or the old or the eternity in your heart. And because he's placed it in your heart, you're looking for it. You're looking to find not just your purpose, but the reason for the purpose. But the reason for the purpose is in the beginning of verse 11. It's God who has made that purpose for you.
Yeah. I mean, this is really helpful. I think not only in evangelizing, but also just thinking ourselves. This is really helpful for us to think through these topics together as we read the book of Ecclesiastes. I wanted to end there, if that's okay.
Sure.
We have a lot of things to talk about. Not that Ecclesiastes 3 is not important, but...
Yeah, there's so much to it, and there's so many more enigmatic parts to it.
Yeah.
Like, verse 21, what does that mean?
Did you know that that's what I wrote? I literally wrote verse 21.
I just have the Bible in front of me. I just had the Bible app in front of me. So he says, who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth? What does that mean?
Does that mean Pookie is going to heaven?
Because does it mean that he doesn't believe in heaven or hell? Or he goes, I don't know if there's a heaven and hell? Because that's not true. Because if you look at chapter 9, he talks about Sheol. Right?
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? So,
Pookie's not a bad word, right?
No. It means someone that you like.
Not that it was a dog. That was the most popular dog.
No. Name. If you say, I love you forever, Pookie. It means, yeah.
But there's that huge debate of whether dogs go to heaven or whether they're just NPCs. And Derek Thomas believes that they go to heaven.
Who?
Derek Thomas.
Derek Thomas believes that
dogs go to
soul
heaven.
Of a dog goes to heaven.
Right? Didn't he say that Ligonier?
There will be dogs in heaven.
Oh, there will be dogs in heaven.
Yeah, your dog will not be in heaven, but there will be animals in the new earth, of course.
Because the lion and the lamb verse. Is that what it is?
I don't know. I think there's a purpose for creation. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. And, again, chapter 3 is full of wisdom. And if you have any more questions, we couldn't even get through actually all of them today. But if you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to us at CJS.podcast@cjsnj.org. I am not on my A1 game. This is like B4. I can't get into it today. So please email us at podcast@cgsnj.org, and we would love to answer your questions, or Pastor Eugene will. I'm going to move on to, if you don't mind, Pastor Eugene, I'm going to move on to a quick Q&A.
We need a beat.
What you got in the bag? What you got in the bag?
What you got in the bag?
And it has to actually do with Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And most of our Q&As in the past couple weeks has been related to our words of wisdom on Wednesdays. WOWOW. Words of wisdom on Wednesday. It's wow wow. Mm-hmm. So it has to do with wow wow. Not to be confused with Wawa. And the idea of discernment and discerning someone's character was something that you talked about this past Wednesday. I'm curious, for someone that says, you know what, I'm not really good at discerning character. I'm not really good at that. How do you improve at that? Like, how do you get better at this skill? Is it even possible to get better?
You just open your eyes. I think people walk around with their eyes closed. It's kind of disturbing.
Deep. Like, not physically, you're talking about like...
Well, you know the whole thing that people say to each other when they first start dating, it's a honeymoon period. You know why they say it's a honeymoon period? Because the other person can do no wrong.
Yeah.
And that's obviously not true. Mm-hmm. If you're married even just a few short number of years, you know that there is something incredibly wrong with your partner.
Yeah.
And so... people would say, you have blinders on, you have a veil over your eyes, whatever, term that they're going to use.
Love blind. Love is blind.
Yes.
No, that's a show.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, when we do that for people in general, that's wrong. So how do you assess someone or discern, what kind of person this is? Well, first you have to open your eyes pretty clearly. But not only can love blind you, but I think hate can also blind. So if you hate someone, they can do no right.
Yeah.
That's also wrong. And so you can be blinded by your emotions, because I don't think it's true love. I don't think it's a really right kind of hate when you do that. So when you say love is blind, I don't think that's really the right kind of love. And when you hate somebody just blindly, I don't think that's the right kind of hate either. So this is not going back to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. I think you've got those definitions wrong. But if you are to assess someone properly, or to assess someone's character properly, first of all, you need to keep your eyes open. And if you keep your eyes open, you should then know what you're looking for. What are you looking for? When Jesus went to Jerusalem and he got out of Jerusalem, he saw this fig tree. It had leaves, and he went to the fig tree. It had leaves, but no fruit. What did he do?
Cursed it.
He cursed it. And then people might say that was kind of mean, but that was a perfect example of Jesus being, I need to assess, discern well, and he does it perfectly, obviously. So people also have a show of certain character, but they don't produce its fruits. So I would think that if you want to discern, look for the fruit. If you want to know if someone's wisdom, does that life have the product or the fruit of wisdom? People can sound really good. Like, we could sound really good here in this podcast. Mm-hmm. And then when the doors are closed, when the curtain comes down, when the mics are turned off and the camera shut off, our lives could be an absolute mess.
Yeah.
That person then we would not be people of wisdom. In fact, we would be people who show a bunch of leaves but have no fruit. That is a terrible, terrible place to be in. And you would not want to be that person, because that's the kind of person Jesus would curse, obviously. But when we want to discern people too, then it's don't just look at the leaves and be wowed and oohed.
Isn't it ood and odd?
Wowed, yeah, I'll flip that. But then...
ood and odd.
Ood and odd. But, look for the fruit.
Gotcha. I think that was a very helpful session, because then it made me think, like, how is my discernment? Like, what is my level of discernment? And, although I do pray for discernment a lot, it was a good time of reflecting and just kind of thinking.
They actually had, I forgot what study was. They actually had some kind of report or a study done on people who like celebrities a lot, so they tend to really idolize celebrities. Those people have low IQs.
Really?
Yeah.
I hate celebrities.
No, okay.
Like, I hate them. It's the time to hate. This for me.
There's no reason to hate them, but there's no reason to idolize them either.
Yeah, yeah.
And you don't know anything about the celebrity's life, especially if they're actor or actress. Their whole job is to deceive. Their whole job is to make you fool you, to give you a sleight of hand, to make you think that they are this character when they are in fact not. And so you could say, I really liked, I don't know, Christian Bale when he played Batman.
Oh, yeah.
My favorite Batman movie was Batman.
But I knew he wasn't
Dark
Batman.
Knight. What?
I knew Batman's not real.
Okay. But you can kind of revere Christian Bale
Yeah.
for playing that role, but then it goes not just in reverence for the role that he played, but just him as a person. Oh, he's just a great person. I don't know that. You don't know that. But that kind of celebrity worship or idolizing goes beyond what it should.
You know what I find to be so interesting is how celebrities, especially, a lot of celebrities, they have so much pull. And, even George Clooney with this whole Joe Biden thing, and how he came out and said Joe Biden's unfit to be president, stuff like that. And a lot of people jumped on that ship. And it's just crazy because, like, I'm not saying what does he know, but what does he know? Like, all these celebrities that are actors and athletes and all that kind of stuff, they come out and they talk about things that is just their opinion. And a lot of people jump on their opinions because they're so famous. It's like, I know this is a terrible take and people might be upset, but actors in high school were losers. No, like for real. Like the drama people, the musical people in your high school, think about it. Losers. Terrible. I know this is a bad word. Losers though, right? You're listening to a loser. Okay, this is a terrible thing to say, and I think people are going to hate me. But were the actors and the drama guys and musical guys like the smartest people in your school? I don't think so. I think that was your valedictorian that didn't have no trauma for drama, no time for drama. I think this episode needs to go. I can't. Anyway.
I like this. We'll keep this in. This is who Sam really is.
No. What I'm
Once
saying
the curtain
is,
drops.
like Brad Pitt in high school was probably a loser, but the moment Brad Pitt says anything, everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, that's so right." Like he was one of those guys that probably had like spiky hair and was like singing in the hallways. Okay, this is not good.
This took a turn.
This is why I hate celebrities.
I think the blind hatred of celebrities is also wrong.
No, that's true. Yeah, there's some good ones out there.
Like Jack Black, your favorite.
He was good in Kung Fu Panda, though. He convinced me he was a panda that time. But yeah, thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. I don't know why I just went on that little
tirade.
Yeah, it's kind of spiraled there.
Yeah, epic rant.
No, but I was thinking about this recently where these people that shouldn't have a say in certain things, at least in a public sphere, and garner like and give influence, are doing that because of their job and their popularity, which has nothing to do with politics.
I mean, I think you're more upset than with people who fall for it.
That's true.
People who follow these paid influencers for, let's say, a political party.
Yeah.
Because they get paid to do it. And, they act like they're nonpartisan, but they're not only partisan, but they're paid partisan.
Like, why is an NBA basketball player telling me who I should vote for? Like, the dude plays basketball.
I think people want to look up to a celebrity for more than they are. That's what I think it is. People want guidance. People want leadership, and they respect them in this one area, so that they want to respect them in all areas.
Right.
So they are looking for a messiah in that sense.
Yeah, I'm not saying basketball players don't know anything or anything like that.
It was a really good take. That's a basketball player.
JJ Redick. but it's regarding basketball. Like JJ Redick isn't saying, hey, go out and vote for Biden, because he has no business saying that, because he doesn't know politics. He doesn't know policies. He doesn't know that kind of stuff. But in basketball, he's very, very good. And I'll listen to what he says in basketball. Anyway, I don't think basketball players don't know anything. I don't think actors don't know anything. I feel like people might get that idea. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, stay in your lane.
Oof.
I didn't say that. All right. Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. I'm sorry about that.
I mean, thank you for that, Sam. I should say that.
Moving into current events. It is really hot in here, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely warm. So I want to just get this going. Moving into current events, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with President Joe Biden at the White House this past week to discuss U.S.-Israeli relationship.
You said Netanyahu? It's Netanyahu.
It was Hebrew. I didn't know how to read it that well. So Benjamin Netanyahu.
Netanyahu. You said Natin again. There's a knot in his Yahoo.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with President Joe Biden at the White House this past week to discuss the U.S.-Israeli relationship, and this was met with very strong mixed reactions. There were protests across Washington, D.C., with some even burning the U.S. flag and hoisting the Palestinian flag in its place. That's the craziest thing I've heard in my life. Who does that in their country? You take away your flag and you put up another flag. That makes no sense. Anyway, I'm so confused by that. Actually, my neighbor has a Great Britain flag up. I'm so confused by that.
Maybe he's British.
I mean, he might be, but like, I'm just so confused. Like, why are you... Anyway, the prime minister also...
Wait, people put up the Korean flags. You're not confused by that, huh?
You have one in.
Okay, see, I knew this, but it's not...
You did it yourself.
Okay, but it's not hoisted. It's not... I'm not hoisting it. It's not hoisted.
Did you put it on your wall?
No, it's just hung there like a poster. It's not hoisted.
That's a hoist.
No, I think for there to be a hoist, there has to be like a flagpole.
I see. So the pole makes it different.
Yeah, because I'm not hoisting it. I'm just
Okay.
hanging it. But the prime minister also addressed Congress, in which half of the Democrats were not present in protest against Netanyahu and the actions of Israel. And what I found to be interesting is in comparison to when President Zelensky came to garner support for the war in Ukraine, and we gave him billions of dollars. So that's just different. I know it's different, but it's an ally coming at a time of war against a terrorist group, whether it's Putin or Hamas, and half of the Democrats didn't show up. It's interesting because it seems very one way. Like this image is presented in a way in the media where the Democrats support Palestine and freedom, fight the power, fight the man, and the Republicans support Israel and USA. Like it's presented where those who support Palestine are pro-Hamas and hate America, whereas those who support Israel support the USA. It's just like split like that, and the media kind of portrays it in that way. And I'm wondering if this is an accurate understanding or if we're just kind of just categorizing people at this point.
Yeah, maybe it's a categorical error or just not complete. First, because a lot of people correlate Christianity with support with Israel.
Yep.
That's not necessarily true. So you could be a Christian and still not support Israel. That's fine with me. Meaning Israel as in the sense where Christians are now saying that they support Israel. Not the political nation that it is now. But we're talking about Israel in the Bible.
Right.
So they'll use the Bible to say, these are God's people, and this is a nation of the people of God in Israel. Mm-hmm. So they'll use biblical support for that. Mm-hmm. I just don't agree with that. I don't think Israel is God's nation. I think, or the current modern day nation of Israel. I think God's nation and the people of God are Christians. So you have to be a Christian Of course, there are ethnic Jews that Paul himself really wanted to have converted. You look at Romans chapter 9. That's totally fine. But I don't think that necessarily has to connect with the nation of Israel, the Israel nation state right now.
Yeah.
And so there could be that category nuance. However, Israel, if you just think of it politically, is, and I said this before, they are our allies. So that nation is an ally with the United States.
Yep.
We should support our allies. If we're not an ally, that's one thing. But we are allies. They are a Western nation. They do have a democratic process that they go through that is very commendable. And we should support nations that hold similar interests to our own.
Yeah.
So that's just politically speaking. We obviously have people who don't agree with that, left-wing, protesters.
Yeah.
And they have gone as far as to take down and burn the U.S. flag and put up the Palestinian flag instead.
Crazy.
Obviously, that should be universally condemned by everybody in the United States. We don't do stuff like that. You don't put up a terrorist flag in lieu of the American flag and burn the American flag.
Yep.
You should be sent out of the country. You don't want to stay here, then you can leave. If you hate this country, get out of the country. But if you stay in this country and you're actively working for the demise and the downfall of the country, you should be expelled from the country. If they are U.S. citizens that are doing that, then there should be some kind of penalty. You can't be actively engaging in, plots to overthrow the government and still stay outside in public. You'd be jailed for that. That's exactly what this is. I don't see the difference. Yeah. And so I think there are some nuances, but some things are pretty clear. You can't be doing that.
So I think the media does kind of play this thing where they over categorize people. So like you said, it is a complex issue. Not everyone that is pro Palestine are pro Hamas. I think
that one's a hard one. That one's a hard one.
I was saying it.
Yeah,
and I don't
because
know.
if you are pro Palestine and you're not pro Hamas, I think you are in a very, very small minority.
Very small.
Very small. Hamas had a vote if Palestine had a vote today, they would vote Hamas in. This is absolutely certain. And so people that go and do reports and all that stuff, they always find this to be true.
Yeah.
There's no one that wouldn't support Hamas. And there are reasons behind it. And the reasoning behind it could be complex, but the outcome is the same. They will still vote for Hamas.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you can be pro-Palestinian in that sense, where you would want a terrorist nation who wants to destroy Israel and the United States, saying that's okay. That's weird.
Yeah.
It's kind of dumb. And so it's, you can't work against your own body. That's so dumb. You can't be like cutting yourself and thinking that's healthy. That's a very unhealthy way to think or live or to act. And so I hope people learn. And what is terrible is that we have a segment in the leadership in our political parties that not only allow for this, but are supporting this. When you said half the Democrats weren't present for Netanyahu's speech, they are the ones that may not be overtly or vocally supporting it, but a lot of them are still letting it go or supporting it from the sides. That's bad.
Yeah.
That's actually evil. And so I hope people get rid of these politicians.
So,
vote them out. That's what I mean by get rid of them.
Oh my goodness. We can't.
These days it's been kind of,
You can't really say that
fiery.
Anymore. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, and because this is such a sensitive topic and because it's so divided, also it's crazy that people were actually chanting that Hamas is coming at these parades, not parades, at these protests where they're hoisting the Palestinian flag.
Why didn't Capitol Police get rid of them?
I don't know.
The fact that they are letting them do this shows how corrupt and bought out they are by the leftists. They want their vote. That's what it is. These guys will vote for anybody who's more supportive of their leftist Hamas agenda. And so they're letting this kind of
Yeah.
evil not only just seep in, but just kind of flood in.
And I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. So maybe it was a radical part of the protest, right, where they're chanting Hamas is coming. But saying that is a pretty crazy thing. Like, you're in the U.S. and you're supposed to support Palestine, and you're saying that Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, is coming. That's like a crazy thing. That's a crazy thing to say. And again, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was a radical part of that protest, or a radical group, or an extremist group, but that's what's happening. I think one of the biggest things that's happening right now with this topic of Israel and Palestine is that the president and the vice president are both calling for a ceasefire, and the prime minister rejected this idea. And as a Christian, you kind of have to wonder, not only in this war, but also in the Ukraine and Russian war. It's like, at what point can we say, like, hey, why don't we just stop killing people and just have a ceasefire? Because the longer we fight, it's just going to kill more individuals. Is it worth it at this point? Why can't we just have a ceasefire to stop the violence? Isn't that a more Christian option?
Yeah, I think a ceasefire would be nice if the conditions were met. You don't have a ceasefire for nothing. I mean, there has to be conditions.
Right. You don't just say, all right, stop fighting everybody.
Yeah,
it never works like that.
It doesn't work like that. Especially if there are restitutions that need to be made, or further, let's say, clarifications of what rules of engagement will be going forward. So if we said things like, well, for there to be a ceasefire, stop firing rockets on us. And if you're like, nah, then how is that a ceasefire?
Yeah,
it just means you shouldn't retaliate or defend your nation. That's ridiculous.
Right.
So the day Hamas surrenders, stops firing rockets, and stops kidnapping women and children, raping them, and beheading them, yeah, sure, ceasefire happens.
Yeah.
But until then, is it unreasonable for you to ask, okay, stop shooting rockets, stop raping our women and children, stop, infringing upon our property and causing havoc and damage, and stop looking for the overthrow of our government? Is that unreasonable? It's like, if that's unreasonable, how can there be a ceasefire?
Right. I think that's one thing that people don't understand, is because when they hear the word ceasefire, they think, okay, peace. Everyone just stop fighting. Like, there's been enough violence, enough blood has been spilt, so everyone just stop. But that's not really what it is.
If they truly did stop, if Hamas stopped killing, gave up the hostages, I don't see why, and surrendered to pay, I don't see why Israel would keep on fighting. There's no one to fight.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that, because I think a lot of people, when they hear the word ceasefire, especially the way that they're talking about it on the media, and it makes it seem like this is the way to peace.
They just hate the Jews. I don't know what else to say. People just hate the Jews.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah. That is an interesting thing, though, huh? Like, it's throughout the generations that's happened over and over and over again.
I think the better question for me is, why do people hate the Jews so much? Why do they think they're so corrupt, evil, all the stereotypes, cheap? There are people that rob and steal, who continue to, think they're better than everyone else, all that stuff. Why do people think that throughout history? Why do, look at Haman.
Yep.
He wanted to kill all the Jews because of what Mordecai did and what other Jews wouldn't bow down to him and things like that. And I think there is a reason, an overarching reason of why people throughout history have hated the Jews, and why even in the chants that they do in Hamas or Iran, where they would say Israel is the little evil and the U.S. is the big evil. I think they just stand in the way of eventually coming after Christians, to be honest. But in the end, these are people who believe that, and I don't think the Jews are right. I think they missed the entire point when they don't believe in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But Jews are people who believe they have the right view on God, Muslims are the people that believe they have the right view on Allah. And that's going to be an eternal conflict until one is proven better.
Yep.
And you're saying, oh, let's not fight, let's live peaceably. There's only one scenario where you can live peaceably when you believe in these things, and that's under the Christian regime. That's what it is. So under a Christian regime, can you really live in that kind of peace? Because Christians don't say believe or you get a sword.
Yeah.
Christians don't do that. But Muslims do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so those are things that we see play out in history. But apparently, like, you can't say that, or people don't know anything.
Yeah.
Then
I want to just move on to what happened last week in Paris. So the Paris 2024 Olympics has started. The opening ceremony was on Friday night, and it was crazy. At one part of the opening ceremony, in between announcing the countries, listing the countries that are participating, there were like little, I guess, shows in between. And one of them was a depiction of the Last Supper with drag queens and a child.
and a fat lady.
So the fat lady was supposed to be Jesus.
Yeah.
This fat lady had a crown on. She was very scantily clad, and there were drag queens all over the table. And then there was also, and I took a picture of this. I took a screenshot of this article, and it was talking about there was a presentation actually of a Greek god. The scene of the Last Supper culminated with a man representing Dionysius being served on a silver platter. And this was from the Paris Olympics Twitter account. They said the interpretation of the Greek god Dionysus makes us aware of the absurdity of violence between human beings. And so it almost makes it seem like, to me, and I'm not like an art interpreter, it almost makes it seem like they're saying the Christian ideals, the Christian worldview, the Christian morals are wrong, and it promotes violence. That's why they have all these drag queens who are condemned by Christians. And, you know, this lady representing Christ with a crown on. There was even a child in that depiction. What is better is this. They're saying that Dionysus represents the absurdity of just violence that man does to one another. So that's Christianity. Christianity leads to people, and it promotes violence amongst brother, sister, amongst people. And that's what it kind of seemed like it was saying. And throughout the opening ceremony, drag queens were present, just dancing, scantily clad again. And this is like supposed to be an opening ceremony that kids are supposed to watch too. Like, this is a thing that, you know, families gather to watch. And that was what was on television. Interestingly enough, out of the 10,000 torchbearers, there were 2 drag queens. And it's interesting, like they're really forcing drag into the home. Like, they're making everyone watch it because everyone was watching this. This is a highly publicized event. And so it's crazy. And people are saying we need to boycott the Olympics as Christians. Is that what we need to be doing? I don't even know how to wrap my mind around this because this is so crazy.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of takes on it that people have been saying that I've heard actually. So maybe we could give a different take. I've heard things like pagan's gonna pagan.
That's true.
And so why are we surprised? You shouldn't be surprised. You could be disappointed, but you shouldn't be surprised. I've heard things like, you know, this is terrible. This is the demonic coming to, you know, over us. I think for the most part, I think everybody has a good point. All these takes are pretty good. Pagans are gonna pagan, but it seems a little more than just paganistic, if you know what I mean. Because the depictions are very overtly anti-Christian.
Yep.
So they take Christian images and they twist it,
Yep.
which makes it anti-Christ
Yep.
or anti-Christian. And so you see all these antichrist depictions, imagery. There was one with a pale horse
Yeah, I saw that.
and a rider,
Yeah.
which is from Revelation, because death was on the pale horse riding. And so that is, a foretelling or forthcoming of the apocalypse. And so they were actually doing that as an artistic representation. I'm not sure exactly why they did it. And so you see all these Christian imageries, and it becomes, they paganize it.
Yep.
But you take overt Christian imageries, and then you make it antichrist. I think
Yep.
that's what it is.
Yep.
And so, is it a surprise that France is antichrist? I don't think so. I think it's not a surprise that France is an antichrist nation. I think if you don't think that it is, then you have been deluded. For the last 100 years or so, it's maybe more. Ever since the French Revolution, France gave up its morality, its belief in God, and what have we made? When Notre Dame was burning, they didn't care. Let's be real. They said this is a French artifact or something.
Yeah.
Not what it stood for. Why people made or created the Notre Dame Cathedral. Anyway, and so when we look at things like that, I think we should be aware of what is going on in the world. The world isn't simply paganistic, meaning they're just going to live out a non-Christian life. The world is anti-Christian because Christ is king. And you are either subject to him or you will rail against him. There's no middle ground. There's no neutral ground or purgatory that you can stay in. It's one or the other. In that sense, it is very black and white in the world. You cannot get away from Christian imagery because Christ has taken over the whole world. So when you make a non-Christ imagery, it's probably antichrist, to be honest. But it could be, subtly depicting the need for a savior. When you look toward beauty, when you look toward purpose, like we were talking about, you are actually pointing to God. But when you forego and when you let go of beauty standards that have been universal, and people, there's this subjectivity to this and that. Of course, with every culture, there is a nuance that depicts the evolution of that culture to beauty, but there is still a universal foundational standard of beauty that everybody has kept. Your nose can't be on top of your forehead and you can think that's beautiful until modern day.
Yeah.
I bet people think that's beautiful if your nose was on top of your forehead, because people have let go of what is supposed to be beautiful, and they want to they want to rail against everything God has created that is good, that he has made beautiful in its time.
Right.
And so I think that's what you should be noticing. This goes to the depiction of modern art, how modern art is just trash now. It's not beautiful by any metric, and yet we still want to convince ourselves that it's beautiful. You can't just splash paint on a canvas randomly and say, this is so beautiful, and say, look at this beautiful artistic representation. It's nothing. And so we do see Western culture, which has been propped up, strengthened by Christian ideals and morality. Now, as they let go of that, go down to not just only a nothingness and into oblivion, they go down to that kind of oblivion, raging and railing against God. So you go down to that place rebelling against God.
Yeah.
Not just, you don't just go quietly in the wind. You go down shaking your fist at God like Stalin.
I think it's a good reminder, like you said, that there is no middle ground. You're either in Christ or you're outside. And those who are outside hate Christ, and those who are in love Christ. And so I think it's a good reminder of that truth. And we're seeing it, like you said, just being represented on a global level. And it is disappointing. At the same time, I think it's a call for us to continue to pray for our country and for the world as well, and for God's people, that we would persevere and be faithful. With that being said, Thank you, Pastor Eugene. And we thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church Podcast. Join us next week as we talk about Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and it's going to be a good one. And also join us on Wednesdays for Words of Wisdom on Wednesdays. Wow. We serve a light dinner, although, again, it's been heavy these days.
White Castle is
I
hefty. Could only do 8.
I don't know if that's only.
People did 12. People were like, I heard 2 of our brothers are going to try to finish a crave case each.
I heard about that, yeah.
It was just 30 each.
These are young men. So
Yeah. It's impressive.
I hope they get what they want. But join us next week as we talk about Ecclesiastes chapter 4. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith. Peace.
Peace.